Good day, everyone. Today I'm going to go over a couple different ways to geocode data in ArcGIS Pro. If you've paid attention to some of the other videos that I've already uploaded, there are other ways to geocode data, be it Google Sheets or Excel. Obviously, there's other programs and software out there to geocode data, but given the structure of the class, we're in Arc Pro, so I'm going to go over a couple different ways to geocode different types of data. One being the county level and another being address level, to where we're going to make two different locators and geocode some data. With that, this first video is going to focus on counties. You can see in front of you that I already have it limited to US counties. I even have Alaska and Hawaii when I zoom out. With that, there's a couple different things you might think of at this point. Well, if we have all the counties, I have the attribute table open. You can see the name, and I already added, and you can see based on the table of contents how I labeled it, I joined in the state name based on the GeoID, so the state ID. Each one of those is unique, and this includes DC, just so if you have questions, DC is included. But I ran into an issue when I was working with some other data of I had lat and long that weren't exactly lining up with the county boundaries, so I wanted to re-geocode them, and that's when, honestly, I taught myself the county side of it. I had never geocoded based on a county, so I figured I'd make an instructional video with that. Because I know quite a few students, people I work with, do a lot of county level research, this is just another way to geocode data if you don't have, say, the state and county FIPS numbers, but you have the name and you have the state. So if you had the string text, yes, if you had both of those, you could do a relate or join based on that, but that's assuming that they're all right. I've done that way before, but since this is the entire US, it's easier just to make a locator and let it do it for us. So with that, I have the counties, I have the information I need, so I have the name of the county, and I also have the state and state abbreviations. So I'm good to go there. This is what I'm going to use to make my locator for the county level. Now let's get into what data I want to geocode. With that, and this follows up from some work on an RTM conjunctive analysis project with the American Terrorism Study, domestic terrorism in the US data. I've geocoded this before, but had a follow-up question or comment on Twitter about far right. So I just created a subset of all incidents that had some type of address field to them. And I'm focusing here on this example only far right events. Keep in mind this is post 9/11, probably through late 2019, early 2020 from the Terrorism Research Center here at UA. With that, as I scroll over, you'll see different levels of addresses based on what's available. We have full address, we have city, we have state. So that's where some of these are tough to identify because you can't always find exact addresses. So this is why we can go up and aggregate to county, because county is a bit easier to identify than specific street addresses themselves. But with that, we have some data here that we can go in and geocode now. So we want to geocode these to the county level to identify far right incidents, so target locations of far right domestic terrorism in the US. If you have questions on the database, check it out on the website. I'll link to it on the YouTube page, but it's pretty cool with what all it gets into. So I'm just going to click save. You can see at the bottom I have these names so I know which sheet that I want to pull up, and I'm just going to load up or add in the data for the far right county. So I can close this and get a jump start on it. I'm going to add data. You can see this is taking me to my old folder. Go into courses, navigate to this course that I'm teaching from. There we go. And if you didn't know, the F5 is kind of a refresh command, so when I was in this folder, it wasn't showing all of my subfolders, so I hit F5 to refresh. If you're working heavily in Arc Pro and you're changing things on the outside of it, so the programs folders, every now and then you'll want to hit F5 just to reload, refresh what changes have been made. Every now and then I've had to exit out and go back in to see everything, but that's rare. Tutorial data. Let's get into our county incidents, and it's going to pull up the two sheets that I had relabeled. Give it a second. There we go. So I don't need the filter. All I'm interested in is the far right county. And And you can see, and I'll open this attribute table as well. Similar to our boundary file for the US counties, we have a state name and we have our county name. I even combine them. This is when I was toying around with the data before. And we have other fields as zip, full address. For now, all we're really interested in is our state and county. So that's what we're going to match based on the county file here. So if I go into my geoprocessing and go back to my toolboxes, what you want to do is create an address locator first. So with that, we want to create a locator. And I say address locator, it's just a locator in general. I'm used to saying address because I work with a lot of address level data. This would be a county locator. And if you've done this before, ArcGIS Pro I do like. It gives you more steps, especially when you're geocoding data too, on what you're filling in. So it's much more intuitive than it used to be. And the textbook itself goes through a lot of the steps of why it matters. And then the address one, I'll get into it a bit more with the lovely to and from on the left and right and what that means. So here we want to specify our country or region. We have the United States, and if you click the drop down, you have a lot of options here. But we're good. We just have the United States. Our table is the county as US added. You have to define the role of this table or shapefile itself. And here we're interested in county. You can see here the other options you have if you want to go into geocoding to different points, different layers, different levels of analysis. So it gives you a lot of options here. For right now, we're just doing an example of a county one. And with that, you have to fill in, well, what fields are the county name? And for this one, I also have the state one. So here, I'm going to specify our county name. There we go. I was just double checking, looking at that attribute table here to make sure I click the first one. And then I also have the state abbreviation in the far right terrorism one. So with that, I'm going to click our state abbreviation, and I'm going to put that one. And here you want to once you make a good locator, I highly recommend saving it to a place you know and use it as often as you can. I honestly use, once I make a good geocoder, and I'll talk about that more at the address level, it's good to keep it where you know. County locator example. And the language defined, this one's English, so it's going to read in as that. I don't need to mess with any of the parameters right now or change the sensitivity or anything to that with it. So I have a county locator based on the county name, state abbreviation. This also matches what I'm going to be using in this far right Excel table with my county and state abbreviation. With that, over the years, I find it much easier, and this is important when it comes to the address side too. When you have larger databases and you end up having to rematch, or you have a lot of tied candidates, make notes, jot them down of how ArcGIS is geocoding them, some of the minute changes. If it's a lot, do a batch change, search and replace in Excel, then bring it back so you're not spending as much time going through the rematching process, because that's some of the most tedious work I've done over the years. Alright, but we're good there. Hit run. And it's just going to create a locator for you. It's not going to pop up in the table of contents. We directed it to the folder we want in, so when we go into geocode our far right counties, we'll have the option to select that locator there. And you can see it's processing, making it down here. Scrolling along, and we should be good now. Cool. Alright, so again, like I said, it's not going to pop up in our table of contents, but now what we want to do is, since we have our table here, we're wanting to geocode it. So if you right click on it, it gives you the option to geocode table. You can also go through the toolboxes part over here. So if I went back, we can geocode within this as well. I get in the habit of just right clicking and I want to geocode the table. And this is where it takes you step by step through what you're doing. This is different than some of the older versions of ArcGIS, especially desktop, so it is a nice upgrade to it. So with it, we have more than one column. So what this is asking is your address located or your geocodable field itself. Is it in one or many? We have state and county in two separate ones, so we have to specify that. Input locator, this is the one we just made, so it's bringing that up automatically. If you're using the geocoding service through Arc, typically that costs credits, money, that kind of thing, so be aware of that. With it, this is what you're going to specify, same as you made the locator. Now you're just going to specify it based on your table itself. So here we had the county of the incident, and then we also had the state, which is the state abbreviation. So state. So we have the county and state, which is going to match the locator we just made. And we specified it's two different fields, so we can hit next as well. With it, it's going to output as I asked for, and let me make sure it's saved into a folder I want, the geo database, so we're good there. With that, if you click all and keep it at all, it gives you a lot of new fields. I typically go with minimal. Location only has been problematic for me in the past, so play around with these depending on what level of information you might want to include all. For right now, especially at the county level, minimal works for what I need. Hit next, and I don't want to select based on a category or anything else with it. These can be useful depending on the type of data you have, but for the county level, how we're geocoding, we're good to go. So if I click finish, we're good. This is kind of just the overview of what's going on, and hit run. You can see they generate, and it popped up that I have some that are tied. So with that, do I want to restart the matching process? Yes, let's go through the ones that have tied candidates. What tied means is there's two different addresses that potentially it could be linked to, so you have to specify which one. And the Albany one, that's interesting, for some reason, is brought up Wyoming as an option, but it shouldn't be. Alright, so what I typically do, even though this one's tied to it already and it has the kind of green indicator of where it's being geocoded to, the habit that I've ran into is it always comes back tied until you unmatch it and then essentially rematch it. So what I've done in the past is when it comes to some of these, if you scroll over these, they'll bring up some of your options here. For this one, I typically click unmatch, and then you'll see up here this changes to no longer be matched. And if, oh, that's why I clicked on the wrong one. So I did something I didn't mean to there. So the one that's unmatched, yes, that one's right. Duh. It auto defaults to matched, and I didn't pay attention to that, so that's a good learning mistake on my end. But come over to our tied ones, and this was what I was expecting, is lovely DC. Since I put it in as DC in Washington, the slight issue is it should be District of Columbia. So if you double click up here and I just type in District of Columbia, hit enter, it's going to update our list down here for us. And this is the one we want. We want to specify this one is actually DC. So if we just click the check mark and now it's matched, and you can see it goes down to 2 now, and this one's another District of Columbia. So this is what's referred to as the rematching process. This is something after you did it once and realized that, oh, I need to put DC in a different way. Update it in your Excel field, or you can even do it within the table if you brought it into GIS. But it would be an easy one to fix on the front end and not have to rematch it on the back end. Even though this isn't too much time, it does take up a little bit more time than some people want to deal with. But I hit OK, and now I have 91 different events geocoded at the county level. So if I exit out of this, we're good to go on our geocoding, and I'm going to just zoom out a bit. You can see where they're located across the US. There are none in Hawaii. I've already looked at this data. There is one in Alaska Prince George's, I believe it is. But now you might wonder, well, since we have essentially the centroid, so the center XY, center and lat long, can we just connect these to the county and then just make a county map? Of course. So with that, if you wanted to do a spatial join, which is we've done a couple times now, if we were to right click, we just want to do a spatial join. Yes, you could do another one based on the name itself again that we kind of went through. This is at least a point layer to work with. I prefer to do it this way for other types of analysis. I can then attach the FIPS codes to it, then merge in some other ACS type data as well at the county level, and it's still at the point level versus the county level and aggregate with it. But with that, we can do a spatial join, and we can see the changes across. I want to join our far right geocoded output. Let's just make sure it's in our geo database and we're good there. So counties, far right, geocoded, joined. We're good. One-to-one, and we want to say contain here, so our counties that contain our points, and we're good there. So click OK. Obviously, we have the same field pop up. Give it a second. Did I not specify the coordinate system, which I might not have, and that's a mistake it looks like I did make. So if I right click, and I'm just going to do the join again and relabel it versus go in and change the spatial extent. I didn't even save it there. That's interesting. Counties, far right, joined. Good to good. One-to-one intersects. We want to say contains. So good there. Good there. Coordinate. Oh. I might know why this is doing it this way. Let's see if it works this way. If not, I know what the issue's running into. Yeah. So if you saw there, it was pending edits. So one of my fields popped up pending edits, and this is the point file. If I hop up to edit, hit save. So when I was rematching, I'd never hit save afterwards. And it was pretty much giving me a warning of this one being locked where I can't do anything with it until those edits are saved. Issue that I should have seen coming, but that's kind of the nature of the beast of when you're working with some of these data files. So let's try this lovely join again for the third time. So we have our counties, good there, far right. And you can see now at the top I don't have that pending edits warning, which I should have seen. I'm going to let this be named since the other ones didn't save. So counties, join, far right. And this is our ATS data. Oops, I didn't mean the plus sign there. Underscore. One-to-one, still want it to be contained. Let's see if third time is a charm here. Ah, and there we go. So I removed the one we had. Can open the attribute table and we'll see a join count here. And let me just go in descending order. Typically what I do once we have a join count is add a field, relabel it, and just save it as that. With this, there's always a good reason to do our statistics, make sure what it adds up to, so this column itself. Keep in mind in our point file we had 91, so we want our sum here to add up to 91 in terms of values that we have. Cool. And we get 91. Obviously our max is 5. We just saw that. And a cool part now is we can do a few different things. Obviously we can do a simple display. If we go to our symbology, for now I'm just going to focus on the continental US since Alaska only had one. But we can change this, and typically you just want the present, so a yes, no, is there anything in it? So if we did a graduated color and then dropped it down to 2, and then let me just reverse these real quick. We're going to have this one equal 0, so our low value, and we're going to change the color scale of that, or scheme. With that almost see-through, but not a whole lot to it. So now our red ones that are appearing are any counties that have an incident in them. That could be anything between 1 and 5. So with that, you might wonder, well, we had 91 incidents, so we should have 91 counties. Keep in mind, no, that's not the case, because if we do a select by attribute, we're going to have some counties that have more than one. So if I go into our counties join file, I want to do a new expression. And I want, where's the join count? Anything that is greater than or equal to 1. You can hit apply. So now you can see these are highlighted around it, the ones that are already selected. But when I go into the attribute table, I can see that 60 of the counties contain 91 of the target locations. So you can see some overlapping, some concentration, some clustering based on where the far right are planning attacks, incident locations for those. And you can see where they are across the US. You can even, based on this, you could do it on within states. So you could add a state layer and see are there certain states that are targeted more. But you can see now where they fall across the United States with that. If there's any questions on the county level geocoding, let me know. At this point, I'm going to hit stop on this one. I'll end up joining the videos together on YouTube. The next one will be at the address level and working with some just examples of addresses, because the textbook goes into quite a bit of detail on it. I'm just going to show another way to do it with some smaller data sets. Thanks. Bye. Good day, everyone. We're going to pick up now and jump down to a smaller unit of analysis when it comes to geocoding, and that's address level geocoding. What you see in front of you is a spreadsheet for Little Rock crime, and this is from 1999 through 2018, so quite a bit. Obviously, for this example, I'm not going to geocode all of this. I'm going to pull out, and I already have it filtered to ag assault and homicide. Keep in mind, especially when you're working with multiple years of data, there could be crime definition changes. Your RMS system could change to where how they're reported and how you obtain it or pull it out. Some of those could change over time. So if I click on the filter tab and hop this down, you can see there's quite a few different types of ag assault classifications. I didn't include the police officer based ones, but there's multiple types of ag assaults that had to be checked for it. Also kept in homicide, which had multiple types of entries for the code description. That just gives you an idea of what to pay attention to. But you can see here is we have our crime, we have our address, and some of them even have intersections. That's the pain of some of the older crime data that actually occurs at intersections. And it's a pain to geocode, because if you look at some of these, each part of the address, even the street address and intersection, they both actually have a specific one. So that creates headaches when it comes to trying to geocode. And with that, in the Blackboard folder, and I'll upload them on the YouTube video too, I have 3 articles that go over the geocoding match rate. What do you want to get in terms of what percentage of your file itself, your addresses, should be geocoded to where you're not going to have a bias with further analyses. If people ask me what they want to see, typically I say you want to get as close to 100 as possible. Obviously that's not always possible, especially given if data you're working with is input by humans, the amount of human error, especially in some of our older files, is very apparent. So keep that in mind of you're trying to take someone else's input and geocode it to an address. That coupled with, since this data goes back to 1999, there's more streets change names, there's a lot of issues that come up throughout the years that can make it difficult to geocode. We're going to make a more recent address locator, so it should collect a lot of the older streets as well. But there are name changes and everything with that. So with it, let's get started. So I have our data highlighted here, or filtered. So I'm just going to hit Control or Shift and go down, copy these into another sheet. And keep in mind, you want to add a couple other address fields. So I have incident date and timestamp, so we're good there. For intersections right now, I'm going to, after I do the Little Rock and Arkansas part, I'm going to go through those and show you how I typically treat them, the good and bad of that. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and insert one column that is going to be our city, and that's Little Rock. I'm inputting this here because I know it's going to be needed with the address locator part. So I'm just your state, getting ahead of that, and then I'm going to autofill down. There we go. And I'm just going to left align everything because this is bothering me right now. There we go. So with that, we have city, state, we have our address, but we also have some with intersections. So I'm going to sort based on the intersection itself. And you can see, I'm trying to see how many we have, quite a few, more than I thought. And just keep in mind, I'm not going to go through the entire rematching process because there's thousands of incidents here. But again, keep in mind, you want to get as many as you can rematched if they are unmatched. So with that, I'm going to create a column here. When I say they both have addresses, this is what makes it difficult. So you have 100 blocks and 100 blocks. It looks like when it's that way with 3,000 and 1,200, but then you have exact address and potentially exact address or intersection. So it becomes problematic with a lot of these. Typically, I would flag them on the front end because that's going to create issues with just trying to rematch them or match them in general. So I'm going to put full address here. And for this part, you essentially want to concatenate these and combine them into one cell so GIS or ArcPro, your address locator, can find it. So I'm going to start with a concatenation. I'm going to take the first one, insert a space, and then insert an ampersand, then followed by a space with the intersection street. So first street, space, ampersand, space, second street. Hit down. So at this point, I just want to copy these, not for everything, but only for the ones that have intersections. So I'm going to copy this down until there's no more intersection streets. There we go. So that comes down. You might see all these spaces, and I'm going to show you a couple tricks to get rid of some of the spaces. It won't be a huge deal. And for these, I just want it to equal the full street here. You might wonder, well, why are you doing that when they're already there? Because I want it all to be in the full address part. So if I do a copy now, and I do a just paste value, it's going to get rid of our formula there, and it just has our street address for us. With it, while this column is highlighted, you can do a search and replace. And here you want to find, typically what I do is I put two spaces in there and I want to replace just with one. And I do this a few times just to get rid of when there's extra spaces throughout some of the fields. And I just keep doing it until it gives me a warning of if something like this, couldn't find any other ones. Alright, so I'm going to put down here ag assault, homicide, LR. I'll go, for now I won't put the years because I know what it's going to be. But now we have a full address, a city, and a state. So that gives us enough to try to geocode from these. So I'm going to go ahead and hit save and hop into ArcPro. Well, there we go. Scared me there for a second. So here in ArcPro, I already have loaded the Little Rock boundary, the streets, and I even threw in some parks because I was interested in what the park file looked like, and I wanted to see how crime relates to those. If that's of interest, look at a lot of the work out of Temple. Dr. Groff still does quite a bit with parks. It's pretty cool stuff, so check it out. But with that, I'm going to just turn those off for now. I have the attribute table open for the street. So we're going to make an address locator based on our to and from on the left and right side of the street, our street name, and we have our city here, and we have our state next to it as well. These are the fields we're going to use to create an address locator. I will say it takes some work. I've made different ones just to see how they match better, which ones give me a greater first percentage match rate. So if it doesn't work great the first time, just be familiar with your data. Go back and forth, and it takes some time. If I need to make batch edits, I typically do it in Excel and then bring it back in and rematch. Once you get used to your data and what streets need to be updated or changed based on the name, you can do that quicker in Excel, then bring it in and just geocode it that way. So take some time, get to know your data. That always saves you some time when it comes to rematching, because that is a very tedious process. All right, but let's add in our ag assault and homicide from 1999 to 2018. So let me come back to this folder. And it's in the full one, and then we have the second sheet. Give it a second to load, hopefully. Taking longer than I imagined. I'll go ahead and hit pause right now. Alright, we got it loaded, and that probably took a bit longer just based on the file size of these. It only took maybe another minute after I hit pause, but I saved some time there. So if I would click the ag assault and homicide one, I'm going to bring that in, and it will come in as a table file. I'm going to right click, and I'm just going to open it to see what it brought in to make sure it's in the right format that we want. So yep, we got our full address, we got city, state, we have, well, that didn't come in as desired, sorry about that. With our incident timestamp, it's still connected to some of our dates. And this is where we have our date, but the time itself had some dates attached to it. So this is where I would say hop back out, update this in Excel, then bring it back. For now, since we're not doing anything time related, we're okay. We're only worried about our spatial part, our full address. So with that, you can see we have over 2,000. If you click load all, it will bring them up. So we have 29,000 ag assaults and homicides from 1999 to 2018 in Little Rock. That might surprise some people, but Little Rock is a fairly violent city given its per capita, its size itself of being around 200,000 people now. But with that, let's get into making an address locator. And you can see here, and this is why I say it's very important to know the data you're working with. Alexander comes up with the city part. So depending on your data itself, the crimes occurring in Little Rock, it's coming from Little Rock Police Department, but the street itself comes back to Alexander. There's a couple different issues when it comes to Little Rock and geocoding that you have to change the city to even Maplevale to pick up the actual street address itself. So keep in mind, this is why I say it's important to understand your data and become familiar with it, and why some people only work in a couple cities is because it takes a while to get to know your data and how to geocode it properly. With that, let's get to it. And again, I've gone over how to geocode in other programs like Excel and Google Sheets. Even ArcGIS has the options to auto geocode for you. But let's get into creating an address locator. So again, it's going to be the US. We're going to do our street layer. And here's where we want to specify what we're trying to do. And this one's a street address. I'm going to, here we go. I was going to say save, but this is where I like to have the attribute table open just to make sure I'm clicking the right stuff. So address on the left from, on the left to, on the right from, on the right to. Confusing, but you get the hang of it after you've made a few address locators and you've seen it. Those are pretty consistent across files. Even when you download it from the census, it will have this information in it. This is what allows you to do some address geocoding for it. So if you're wondering where to find these files, the census has these available. So here's where I just specify. So this one's asking for the left house from, it's left house from, left house to, and I'm just going in where you see the asterisks, you have to have those. It's the required fields. Scroll down. Street name is similar to what we have over here. name. And then with that, we have post street type. So we don't want the prefix, and this is where when I say I've made a couple different locators over the years, some I use direction, type, and the pre and post. You get different match rates with it given what's missing in your potential file. For us, it's crime. Depending on the data there, you get very different results from it. So I'm not going to do a prefix direction. Neighborhood, we're good. We want to identify the city though. So our city here is our left city, city L, then city right. I'm going to leave, even though this file has zip codes in it. If I scroll to the right, you can see it has more identifier information from the left and right. Given our crime data does not have zip or anything else to it, I'm going to keep it just to the address parts for now. Keep scrolling down. It gives you a lot. State, since I know we're already in Arkansas, we're okay there. And there we go. So I'm going to create this locator. I'm going to save it to this geo database that I'm already working in. LR Street Locator. And with that language, why is this having an issue? Invalid workplace. I'll just save it out here and I'll do address. It doesn't like the geo database, it looks like. There we go. I'm going to hit English, and then you have additional parameters. If you have alias names or another table that you want to match to, you have that option. For now, we're good to go. Hit run. Keep in mind, it's making it based on the street layer here. And you can see I didn't clean up this file. It has a lot of unnamed ones. It keeps interstates. I'm keeping interstates now because if you glance through our ArcGIS and homicide, some did specify interstate, so you have the opportunity for those types of crimes to occur on an interstate. With that, what warnings popped up? No, we're okay there. So with that, if I right click now on our table and I want to hit Geocode Table, similar to what we did with the county, it's going to give us some steps to walk through. With that, we have multiple fields again, so more than one field. We're going to input the one we just made, the address locator. We're going to specify our address itself was our full address. Our city is city, state is state, so it automatically grabbed those for us and auto-generated it for us, so we're good there. Where it's outputting, let's just double check to see where this is going. So we're good there. It's going to our Geocoding LR database. Again, I'm going to keep this to minimal just for the sake of what we're doing here. With that, you can still change it based on category. For right now, not interested in it for this example. And then you have your table here. It's breaking it down for you, and it gives you some options if you wanted to change it at this point. But for now, just going to hit run. The default is to have an offset for it. So let's hit run. I'll hit pause here because I want to give it some time to run everything since there are 29,000. And as this speeds up, if you look down in the right hand corner, you can see how it's doing here. You can see there's quite a few tied ones, so on my part I would probably take it back into Excel and take a look at the tied ones and see if there's any patterns with those. But overall, out of over 29,000 incidents of ag assault and homicide, 95% of them match out of the gate. This is actually very good. Traditionally, it took me, and I had geocoded these addresses before in 3-year segments with a friend of mine, Rick, that's now at UT Chattanooga. I lost that file. Computer crashed. It's a pain. Nowadays, given the better street layers and address information, address checking, has some good match rates here. The textbook gets into how you can change the sensitivity, the offset, everything with that. If you're wanting to do street centerline, obviously you need to take off the side set and inset. I'll link to the ArcGIS Pro discussion on that and how to find it. For now, I was really just interested to pull up our data itself. When it pulls up for you, it's going to ask, do you want to rematch? Obviously, here, hit yes. And keep in mind, since I had a great example in the county one, any changes you make before you try to use your street layer or your point layer, click Save in your Edit tab. So if you make any changes, make sure you save them. So as you can see here, it brings up, and this one defaults to our unmatched ones, so it pulls those up. You can also do it, typically I reorder based on that to see what these look like from unmatched to tied, so I can kind of follow through to see potentially if something's being pulled that's not supposed to. And some of these, like I said, could potentially not be in Little Rock based on the address itself. So let's just see if it's a simple one as changing the city name, hit enter. Nope. And Maplevale. Nope. And I do that commonly because some of these have that issue. But if you notice, when I change it in the rematch part, it's also changing it in the attribute table itself. So at this point, I would go into Google, and let me just open a Google sheet and put in this exact address. So 1 Hillside Circle, Little Rock, Arkansas. I want to see where it comes back to, and potentially it's a different name. So I have it open in my other sheet now, and I'll bring it over once I pull it up. And this is why I appreciate Google, and this is what it's asking, did you mean court versus circle, which could be throwing it off. If I click that here, you can still see it's not giving me an exact address. So we see that it's Hillside Drive in North Little Rock. So it's not finding something specifically in Little Rock with Hillside. So to me, coming up and there's not a quick one that pops up, I'm going to leave this one as unmatched because there isn't anything that I can re-geocode it to. So I just click the next arrow, and I'm going to do the Carroll one now. This one is a good example, and I can pull it back over, of when I Google it, it changes it. It is circle, but it's Maplevale. So again, let me just click in here. If I change the city to Maplevale, hit enter, it actually pulled up for us. You can see the even offset here on Alexander Road. And this is why I say I'm familiar with Little Rock, because I know there is this issue with their crime data. It takes some time to go through, and you understand, and that's where I've spent countless hours re-geocoding, rematching basic addresses and Googling them and seeing why the addresses don't line up. So this takes some time to get used to, but once you know it, you can keep more crime data in, which gives you more power when it comes to analysis, and you can better represent what's occurring. So since I found this one, it's here. I can click the green check mark, and it matches for us. You can see we're down to 9 now. So pretty cool part. You would go through your unmatched ones, do as many as you can there. Similar with your tied ones. So with tied ones, you want to be careful. And this is where I typically end up Googling a lot. If they're intersections, I would treat it as the intersection itself, so you can see the Battery and Wright Avenue. So the one that's highlighted, I would match that one. That's what is first selected. It's giving you the score of how close it is to what it's searching for. If there are a lot of matched ones that have similarities, and these are probably most of, my guess, the intersections, which it's looking like, I would spend some time on those. Some of them you will not be able to match at all. So like this one has a tie, but if you look at this, 15th Street doesn't connect. So there is a break in it. So I would actually unmatch this one because you don't know which intersection point it is at, if it's at the one down here or the one north of it at B. So with that, you have the option here to unmatch. I would do that, and it would go back into your unmatched folder or a little drop down for it. It updates based on that. So here's where I would take your time and go through these, and it does matter, and that's where I say it is tedious. But once you clean it, a file like this you could do tons of research with, tons of analysis with, but it lets you understand your data, and that's where I say spend a lot of time going through it. It does matter. It's very important to do this process because if you notice our intersection data, if I open it back in Excel, is a lot of our older data back into the 1999 to early 2000s. You see more intersections with that or those years. So you don't want to take all of those out because then you're going to be missing specific crime data for specific years, not randomly throughout your entire data set. So keep in mind that issue that can pop up. With that, like I said, I'm not going to go through all of these, but it was a good match rate overall. 95%, I'm actually very thrilled with. I did not know, I did not pre-do this one, so I didn't know what to expect, but seeing that it was just above 95% is phenomenal. What I typically do after I get to a good match rate, I select by attribute status equals M, so we have our matched ones. Even with your tied ones, I would go and make sure you have them matched to the ones that you want, and then I would export out the ones that are matched, so it would be your subset. It takes out the unmatched ones. Obviously make note of that. You still talk about it in your papers. If you see publications, it typically provides the match rate, percentage matched, in parentheses after it's talking about the data itself. And this is why it's very important. If you don't see that number, ask the authors, ask the presenter, because sometimes once it gets down to, and there's some data I've worked with that address level information is terrible. Even in this day and age, even in 2021 now, some agencies, how it's being collected, how it's being input into a data system itself is terrible. So what's given back out when you try to use the data, you don't know what you're getting and what it represents. So keep in mind, you need to be familiar with your data set. And that's where a lot of your time and effort is spent cleaning data. Cleaning data, cleaning data, cleaning data. After that, you can do as much analysis as you want. Once you're comfortable with your data at a certain point of it being clean and usable, that's where a majority of my time is spent, is going through data sets, cleaning them, making sure I know what's going on and if there's any issues with it. On the back end, when it comes to analyses, there's tons of walkthroughs, tutorials of what you can do with different data sets, what's appropriate to them. So with that, this is just one way to do a quick way of an example of if you have crime data but don't have it geocoded, how to create an address locator within ArcGIS Pro. Again, if you don't have a street layer, the census, similar to how we've downloaded other spatial files, they do have the relational database to pull out address on left, from right, to right, and do everything with that. So if you don't have access to it, the city jurisdiction you're working with doesn't have a data portal with the center line or street file on it. It comes from the census, so you can grab one there as well. If there's any questions, please let me know, reach out. But this is a fairly straightforward example of how to geocode data in Little Rock. Cheers.